the moment I told them I was giving them a tenner and getting them involved, the uptake was massive. So much so that I had to limit it to 22 boys. And what's happened is that these 22 boys have used the initiative. They've enjoyed the competition that the SEP program engenders to actually get involved in making money. And just to give you an example, in the last week or so, what I've been doing is I've been running a gardening program where the boys get together and they garden, and I teach them the skills of gardening. And your boys from SEP heard about this, and they came along to my boys and they said to them, "Oi, you're doing a good job. Could we employ you to garden for members of the staff?" And so what's happened is that a number of these boys have got together and have actually employed friends of theirs to work for the SEP program and to use the skills I'm teaching them in gardening to make money. And it's taken off really well, and the boys are loving it. They're getting paid peanuts, actually, but they're getting paid for it. The other SEP boys are learning a lot of the skills about relations with people and how if you employ someone, the relationship changes very quickly. And that kind of educational benefit you just can't imagine in the classroom. So what the SEP program is doing, although it's helping the wider framework, it's also helping these boys to deal with little relationship issues like the power struggle in an employment scenario. And that's been fun. That has been really fun. Last week I had them washing a car at the back of my house, and they're washing a teacher's car, and I think they're getting paid £10 for it or so, and they're paying their peers £1 each to do the work. So they're making quite a decent profit out of it. But lo and behold, while they were cleaning this chap's car, they found £5 worth of shrapnel down the side seat. And that has been fun. So they got this £5, and they came to me with a little moral dilemma. "Sir, do we keep the change, or do we give it to the person?" And then they gave it to the teacher, who said, "No, look, that is lost money," and they added it to the pool. So in effect, as you can hear, the boys are making good money. And it is quite hard work. They're actually getting their hands dirty. They're getting out on a Wednesday, and they're making good money for the charity. Of the 20 boys, on average, they've made about £100 in 2-3 weeks per group, which is really impressive. That's 30-40% increase in their wealth in that short period of time. There are some boys with a little bit more adventurous ambitions to print T-shirts, which is going to take longer. And I think I'm finding one of the interesting lessons is the relationship between those boys who make a quick buck, going around with a charity letter saying, "Give me the money," and those boys who are a little bit more patient, a bit more inventive, and they're actually printing T-shirts, advertising it, marketing. And I'd like to come back to you perhaps in a month's time and tell you who perhaps made more money in the end. Was it the classic charity worker just begging for money, or was it the bit more inventive chap who goes around and writes a letter and prints a T-shirt and then sells it and creates money that way? So that'll be an interesting little academic exercise at the end. The other thing which I've noticed about the SEP program, which has been very useful, is the way boys are now suddenly engaging in the bigger picture. As we know, aid is very much on the national and political agenda, with Bono and Bob Geldof working in Africa, trying to bring help to many of the AIDS victims. And so what we found is these boys are suddenly raising money, and they're asking questions like, so how many people have got AIDS? And what is AIDS? Where before, if you taught that in a PSHE lesson, they probably would have switched off. But now, because they're raising money, their hard-earned cash, their fingernails broken in the ground, they're working, and they're suddenly realizing this money is going to a specific cause, and they're asking much more meaningful questions. And I think that, for me, has been very beneficial. For me, I think, as an educationalist, the most beneficial thing has been the power of competition. If I say on a Wednesday to the boys, "Okay, you play golf, you play tennis," they have their little competitions within their activities, but it's kind of a dead end. By the end of the day, you give a Mars bar to the chap who's won the golf game. But you give them all £10, and you say, well, no matter what activity you get involved in, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, the common playing field is making money. Show me the money. And the kids love that, because suddenly now the competition is across the whole board. And you should hear the chitter-chatter going on and a little bit of rivalry that's being generated. So I love the SEP program's idea of using £10, because it gives you that common denominator of using money, which then generates the competition, which, as we all know, kids love. And they're using that to spur them on. And although they're not keeping the money, they're loving making the money. And as we all know, that is often what keeps the market forces going. So much so that SEP has just taken off. And I'm very, very impressed. What I've done is I've got the Year 9 boys working on a Wednesday in a slot of about 2 hours. And what I do is I actually allocate a member of staff to 2 to 5 boys. So that member of staff is responsible to make sure that any letters written are legal and appropriate. Any activity done is above board. Any health and safety issues are covered. Last week we had boys gardening, and I had to make sure that there was a health and safety officer on hand should a boy impale his foot with a fork or something. So that is important. And being 13 to 14-year-old boys, they have a lot of enthusiasm. They're still at the age where they really do get excited by an idea. And so we engender that enthusiasm, we use it to keep the activity going. At the moment, I'm running it for a term at a time. So rather than give them a year, which perhaps I feel would be too long, and they might lose a bit of the momentum and the focus, I've given them one term, and I said, by the end of term, what are you going to raise? In terms of some of the perhaps warning signs that come up when you start an activity like this, the one that I had happen this week was I said to the boys, okay, here you go, raise the money. And they're competitive by nature. And one group of boys typed up a letter, didn't show me the letter, used, I don't know how they managed, but used Wellington College letterhead, and then went into the town, randomly knocking on people's doors saying, hi, we're from Wellington College, we're raising money for HOPEHIV charity. Could we do any odd jobs for you, in which case you pay us, and we promise to give the money to charity. All sounded fine, but not many people really had odd jobs that boys of 13-year-olds would do in an hour or so. At which point the boys started asking for money, just saying, well, in which case, would you please give us some cash, you know? Coming back boasting that, sir, we had raised £60 this afternoon. And I had to cringe and say, okay, A, you can't do that. It's against the law just to knock on people's doors. B, you didn't get permission to leave the grounds. C, you didn't get permission or let me read the letterhead that you had, the letter that you had typed up. And D, you could have got yourself in serious trouble. You know, what happens if you'd met somebody who wasn't so friendly and had objected to your kind of activities? So I think if you are, in my case, as I've said to my colleagues, running this activity, just be careful. These boys sometimes can get too enthusiastic, and just keep an eye on what they are doing every step of the way so that any money raised is above board. I just said to the boys when they were doing this, I said, gents, it's not the idea to just shake a box and ask for money, because we can all do that, and a lot of charities do that. And I explained to them that the benefit of the SEP is that actually it's an enterprising program, that the boys need to take their £10 and make it into £100 or more if they can. So I just persuaded them not to knock on doors saying, oi, give me your money, and actually think of an idea where they could create wealth by selling something, making something, using their expertise. And I think they've understood that, and hopefully that won't happen again. As is the case with 13-year-olds with year 9s, is that the chances are that you may find yourself doing most of the work. And so when I said to some of my colleagues, please would you help out with this program, that was their first concern, is that they're going to end up doing most of the work. And it can happen like that. Some boys can sit back if the teacher is very enthusiastic, and the boys will do nothing and wait for the teacher to take the initiative. But what I've found is that actually you just need to be brave enough to say to the kids, do it. And they do run with it. And the only management I've had to do as a teacher is write the odd email, check the letterheads, make sure that the letters are appropriate, keep track of funds. I found that was very important, that the money had to go into the school fund, into the school bank account, and they had to keep records of what they were earning, because these boys are getting over £100 in a few weeks. And so it was important to manage that rather than leave it in the room to get stolen. Other than that, there's not much really needed. Every now and then come up with an idea. Say to the kids, what about car washing, or what about doing something, thinking out the box rather than just what schoolboys think about. Give them something a bit different to think about. But once you've given those ideas, let them run with it. And I've found that the amount of work I've had to do has been quite minimal, which is good. And colleagues of mine are keen. They're engaging in the process, which is good. I've at the moment got 4 colleagues working on this system, so it's been working well.